Ever notice how some sports drills seem like a good idea at first,
Yeah.
but then
Yeah.
you realize they might actually be holding you back? Like remember passo dicks in handball? You had to make 10 passes before you could even try to score.
Oh, yeah, interesting example. It seems logical.
Right.
Practice passing to improve teamwork, right?
Yeah, exactly. But later I realized that focusing so much on passing could actually make you hesitate to seize an opportunity for a quick shot. You know,
Yeah.
it's like we're hardwired to follow the drill, even if it means missing out on a better strategy.
It's a great example of how our understanding of performance often leans on what we can easily see and break down, just like Descartes taught us. We try to simplify complex actions into smaller, seemingly logical steps.
You mean we fall into the trap of thinking that if we perfect each individual part, the whole performance will magically fall into place?
Precisely. And when it comes to human potential, that's often not the case. We're diving into the heart of this today, exploring how our understanding of performance needs a serious upgrade. We've got some fascinating sources to guide us. One delving into how different personality types approach performance, and another, a deep philosophical dive into what the author calls a third universe of performance.
A third universe.
Yes.
Now that sounds intriguing. So are we talking about some kind of cosmic athletic ability here?
Not quite cosmic, but it is a pretty radical shift in perspective. You see, we often get stuck in two main ways of thinking about performance. The first, let's call it Universe 1, is the age-old talent myth. The idea that some people are just born to be superstars. The second, Universe 2, is all about striving for that ideal form, meticulously mimicking the perfect technique.
Okay, so universe 1 is like you're either born with it or you're not. And universe 2 is all about finding the instruction manual for peak performance and following it to the letter.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Neuroscience shows us that our brains are incredibly adaptable, constantly changing based on our experiences. So reducing everything to genetics just doesn't cut it. And as for that ideal form, well, the problem is that real-life performance is rarely predictable. Sticking rigidly to a script just doesn't work when you're facing a live opponent or a rapidly changing situation.
So it's like the difference between learning a choreographed dance routine and actually improvising on the dance floor.
Yeah.
You need the basic skills, sure, but true mastery comes from adapting to the music, your partner, even the mood of the room.
Exactly. And this is where the third universe comes in. It throws out the rule book of relying solely on talent or rigid technique and says true performance is about inventing in the moment, responding to the ever-changing dynamics of the situation.
So instead of trying to control every aspect of the performance, you're saying the key is to become incredibly adaptable, to actually lean into the uncertainty. Okay, I'm starting to wrap my head around this third universe idea, but it can't just be all about reacting on the fly, right? There's still got to be some method to the madness.
Absolutely. It's not about tossing out skill and discipline entirely. Instead, the third universe is about reframing how we approach them. Imagine a jazz musician. They've spent years mastering their instruments, studying the greats. But when they launch into a solo, it's not just random notes.
It's like they're tapping into something deeper, using all that knowledge as a foundation to create something new and spontaneous.
Exactly. It's about internalizing the fundamentals so deeply that they become second nature, freeing you to improvise and respond in the moment. Remember that Passé Dix example? A third universe coach wouldn't drill 10 passes in isolation. They'd create game-like scenarios, forcing players to make quick decisions under pressure, read their teammates, anticipate their opponents.
So the training itself becomes a kind of improvisation, prepping you for the unexpected.
Precisely. And that's where the role of the coach, the mentor, even just how we approach personal growth takes a turn. Instead of being a commander dictating the right way, they become a cultivator.
Cultivator, so less drill sergeant, more like a master gardener.
They're creating the optimal environment for growth, giving the athlete the tools and, importantly, the trust to find their own solutions. They design training that embraces uncertainty, mimicking the unpredictable nature of a real game or performance.
Instead of freaking out when things go off script, you're encouraged to experiment, adapt, maybe even view those curveballs as opportunities.
Exactly. And this isn't just for elite athletes. Imagine applying this to any field. What if, instead of being paralyzed by fear of failure, we got curious about it? That's a hallmark of the third universe. Mistakes become data points, not dead ends.
It's like reframing our relationship with failure altogether. Instead of, am I doing this right?
Right.
It becomes, what can I learn from this to get closer to my own version of excellence?
And that brings us to another crucial aspect of the third universe, the power of intrinsic motivation.
You mean that drive that comes from within, that pure joy of pushing your limits just for the love of it?
Exactly. Think of athletes who just radiate joy even when they're pushing themselves to the limit. They're not chasing external rewards. They're captivated by the process itself, the pursuit of mastery, because it feels right.
And that kind of passion, that fire, it's contagious, isn't it? But how do we cultivate that inner drive, both in ourselves and those we mentor?
It's a journey, not a destination, and there's no magic formula. But the third universe offers some intriguing clues. One key concept is the idea of the state of grace, that elusive feeling of flow that many high performers describe.
Ah, flow state. That feeling where you're so locked in, time melts away and everything just clicks. We've all had glimpses of it, I think.
Precisely. While we can't force it to happen, we can create the right conditions for it to emerge. It's about finding that sweet spot between challenge and skill, where we're pushing our boundaries but not feeling overwhelmed.
So setting ambitious but achievable goals, stepping outside our comfort zone, and maybe telling that inner critic to take a hike.
Exactly. And that's where having a third universe mentor coach, or even just a supportive friend, is invaluable. Someone who sees your potential, challenges you to grow, and celebrates your unique path, even when it zigs and zags.
It's about fostering a culture of support and encouragement, where people feel empowered to take risks, to express themselves, and define success on their own terms, not some external metric.
Absolutely. Which brings up an important question about this third universe approach. If we're moving away from a one-size-fits-all model, how do we ensure we're honoring the individual while still striving for excellence?
Now that's a question worth exploring. But before we get too far down that road, one thing that struck me in these sources is how our own process, how we use process information to make decisions, might play a role. Some people thrive on analyzing data, while others are all about intuition and gut instinct.
That's a fascinating point, and it underscores how crucial self-awareness is to unlocking our full potential. If we can understand our natural strengths and tendencies, we can create environments and strategies that optimize how we perform. It's about working with our wiring, not against it.
So it's like we each have our own unique operating system, right, when it comes to performance.
Yeah, like our own internal software.
And understanding our own personal style can be a game changer in how we approach challenges and strive for excellence.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that there are countless paths to success, and what works for one person might not work for another. And that's where the ethical dimension of this third universe approach becomes really important.
Because if we're saying there's no single right way to perform, how do we make sure we're not just celebrating mediocrity or letting people off the hook too easily?
Right. It's a good question. It's about, how do we say this? It's not about lowering standards, but about shifting our focus from judging outcomes to cultivating the process of growth and mastery. It's about asking different questions. How can we create environments that nurture individual potential while still pushing people to their limits? Provide support and guidance without stifling creativity and authority.
So it's less about imposing a predetermined definition of success and more about empowering individuals to define for themselves within a framework of continuous learning.
Exactly. It's about trusting in the power of human potential to unfold in its own unique way, recognizing that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Pretty radical shift in perspective. To move away from this idea of performance as a linear path to success and embrace this more fluid, adaptable, and ultimately more human-centered approach.
It is, and it requires us to rethink not just how we train and perform, but how we view ourselves and our place in the world. It's about embracing uncertainty not as something to be feared, but as a catalyst for creativity, innovation, and growth.
It's about recognizing that we're not just actors following the script, but co-creators of our own performance in our own lives in a constantly evolving world.
Exactly. And as we wrap up our deep dive today, that's the challenge we leave you with. How can you apply the principles of the third universe? The adaptability, the intrinsic motivation, the trust in your own potential to unlock a new level of performance, not just in the athletic arena, but in all areas of your life.
It's about embracing the journey with all its twists and turns and discovering the joy of continuous learning and growth.
Oh,
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of human potential.